You wake up at noon again, scroll for an hour before getting out of bed, promise yourself today will be different. By evening, you've accomplished nothing that matters, and you can't quite figure out where the day went. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. But here's what's terrifying. You're not just wasting time, you're actively building a version of yourself you don't want to become, and you don't even realize it's happening. Your 20s aren't just another decade. They're the construction phase of your adult identity. The habits you're forming right now, the patterns you're repeating, the small choices you're making every single day, these aren't neutral. They're either building the life you want or building a prison you'll spend your 30s trying to escape from. And the most dangerous part? The traps that are derailing you don't announce themselves. They disguise themselves as normal life, as taking it easy, as just existing. They're silent, which means you won't notice the damage until years have passed. Let's start with the most insidious one, the comfort addiction. You think you're just relaxing after a long day, but something darker is happening beneath the surface. Every time you feel even slight discomfort, boredom, uncertainty, effort, awkwardness, you immediately reach for something to make it go away. Phone, food, Netflix, another YouTube video. The problem isn't that these things exist. The problem is that you've trained yourself to never sit with any uncomfortable feeling for more than 30 seconds. Your brain has learned that discomfort equals emergency, and the emergency response is always the same: escape into something easy. This creates a devastating feedback loop. Real growth only happens in discomfort. Learning a difficult skill feels frustrating. Building a business means facing constant uncertainty. Having meaningful conversations requires emotional vulnerability. Working out demands physical strain. Every single thing worth having requires you to tolerate feelings you've been training yourself to avoid. And without realizing it, you've been systematically destroying your ability to do anything difficult. You haven't become lazy, you've become allergic to the very sensation that signals progress. Then there's the trap of passive existence. You're not actively making choices about your life, you're just responding to whatever comes your way. Someone invites you somewhere, you go. An app suggests content, you watch it. A notification appears, you click it. You're like a pinball being bounced around by external forces, and you've convinced yourself this is what living looks like. But here's the truth. If you're not actively deciding how to spend your time, your attention, and your energy, someone else is deciding for you. And they don't have your best interests in mind. Tech companies employ thousands of engineers whose only job is to capture your attention and keep it. Social media algorithms don't care about your goals or dreams. They care about engagement metrics. Your brain's reward system is being hijacked by systems specifically designed to make you passive. Every autoplay feature, every infinite scroll, every algorithmic recommendation is pulling you further from intentional living and deeper into a reactive state where you're just consuming whatever is put in front of you. The consequences show up slowly, which is why this trap is so dangerous. You don't notice that you haven't read a book in 2 years. You don't notice that you've stopped having original thoughts because you're always consuming other people's opinions. You don't notice that your attention span has shrunk to the point where a 10-minute video feels long. By the time you realize you've handed over control of your mind, years have passed and the patterns are deeply entrenched. Let's talk about the comparison spiral. Your 20s are the first time you're truly exposed to thousands of other people's lives through social media. You see their highlight reels, their promotions, their relationships, their travels, their achievements, and you compare it to your behind-the-scenes footage. The raw moments, the struggles, the mundane reality of your actual life. This comparison feels automatic, almost innocent, but it's poisoning your ability to build anything real. Here's why this trap is so damaging. Every moment you spend measuring yourself against someone else is a moment you're not spending building your own path. Comparison drains your motivation instead of fueling it. When you see someone excelling in an area, instead of inspiring you to work harder, it makes you feel inadequate, which makes you want to give up. You start believing that success happens to other people, not to you. You begin to internalize the idea that you're behind, that you've already missed your window, that everyone else figured it out except you. The reality is that everyone is struggling with something. Everyone feels behind in some area. But social media creates an illusion of effortless success that makes your own effort feel like evidence of inadequacy. So you stop trying as hard. You lower your standards. You tell yourself that ambition isn't for you. And without noticing, you've let other people's curated images define what's possible for your actual life.
Then there's the trap of delayed living. You're waiting until you have more money, waiting until you finish school, waiting until you lose weight, waiting until you feel ready, waiting until the circumstances are perfect. You've created an elaborate story about why you can't start the thing you actually want to do right now, and that story feels so reasonable that you believe it. But here's the harsh truth. You're not waiting for the right moment. You're avoiding discomfort and calling it practicality. That book you want to write? You could start it today with 15 minutes and a blank document. That business idea? You could validate it this week by talking to potential customers. That skill you want to learn? Free resources exist right now that could get you started. The person you want to become? You can take one small action toward that identity in the next hour. The circumstances will never be perfect. The feeling of readiness will never arrive on its own. You're not waiting for permission or for conditions to improve. You're waiting because starting is uncomfortable, and you've built an identity around avoiding discomfort. The years pass while you wait. 22 becomes 25. 25 becomes 28. 28 becomes 30. And suddenly you look back and realize you spent an entire decade preparing to start instead of actually starting. The trap convinces you that caution is wisdom when it's actually just fear wearing a mask. Here's another trap you're not noticing: the friend group echo chamber. Your close friends shape your reality more than almost any other factor. Their standards become your standards. Their habits become your habits. Their definitions of success become your definitions of success. This happens automatically, without conscious choice, because humans are social creatures who unconsciously adapt to their environment. If your friends are all content with mediocre careers, unfulfilling relationships, and weekend-focused lives, you'll absorb that as normal. Not because you actively chose it, but because constant exposure makes it invisible. The danger is that you'll wake up at 30 with a life that looks exactly like the average of your 5 closest friends, and you never consciously decided if that's what you wanted. You just drifted there because it was comfortable, because it required no friction, because maintaining social harmony felt more important than maintaining your individual vision. Your friends aren't bad people. They're just pulling you toward their center of gravity, the same way you're pulling them toward yours. If their center of gravity isn't where you want to be, you're in trouble. Let's talk about the trap of instant gratification. You've grown up in a world where almost everything can be delivered immediately. Food, entertainment, information, social validation, it's all instant. This has fundamentally rewired your brain's reward system. You've lost the ability to work towards something for months or years without seeing immediate results. You've lost the ability to do something difficult today for a payoff that won't come until tomorrow, next month, or next year. This shows up everywhere. You can't stick to a workout routine because you don't see results after 2 weeks. You abandon learning a language because you're not fluent after a month. You give up on a creative project because it doesn't go viral immediately. You job hop because you're not senior level after 1 year. The trap is that everything worth building takes time. Compound interest, whether it's financial, skill-based, or relational, requires patience. But patience feels like punishment when your brain has been trained to expect instant rewards. The result is that you're constantly starting things and never finishing them. You have a graveyard of abandoned projects, each one dropped at the first sign of difficulty or delay. You've convinced yourself you're exploring your options, but really, you're just proving to yourself over and over that you can't commit to anything hard. Each abandonment makes the next one easier, until giving up becomes your default response to challenges. Now here's the trap nobody talks about: the identity confusion. You spent your teens being told to explore, experiment, figure yourself out. But your 20s are when that exploration needs to start narrowing into decision. You need to choose a direction, commit to developing real expertise in something, build a stable foundation. But you're paralyzed because choosing one path means closing doors to others. So you keep everything vague. You keep your options open. You refuse to commit fully to anything because commitment feels like limitation. But here's what you're missing: freedom without direction isn't freedom, it's drift. Keeping all your options open means you're not going deep on any of them. You're not building real expertise. You're not developing a strong identity. You're remaining a perpetual beginner at everything, which means you're never good enough at anything to create real value. The people who succeed in their 20s aren't the ones who kept all their doors open. They're the ones who picked a door, walked through it, and committed to mastering whatever was on the other side. Let's address the trap of cheap dopamine. Your brain runs on dopamine. It's the neurotransmitter that drives motivation and reward. But dopamine is meant to reward difficult achievements: hunting food, building shelter, forming relationships. Those things required effort, and dopamine was the payoff that motivated that effort. Now you can get massive dopamine hits from scrolling social media, playing video games, eating processed food, watching pornography. Your brain gets the reward without the effort.
This breaks your motivation system. Why would your brain motivate you to do something hard, study for hours, build a business, develop a skill, when it can get the same neurochemical reward from 5 minutes of scrolling? It wouldn't. So you find yourself unable to do difficult things, not because you lack discipline, but because your brain's reward system has been hijacked by easy alternatives. You're essentially a drug addict, except the drug is constant novelty and stimulation, and it's completely socially acceptable. The trap is that these cheap dopamine sources feel like they're satisfying you, but they're actually making you emptier. The temporary hit fades immediately, leaving you craving more, so you consume more and more, and you never feel satisfied because you're consuming instead of creating, receiving instead of generating, being entertained instead of achieving. The dopamine from actually accomplishing something difficult lasts. The dopamine from scrolling vanishes in seconds, but your brain has been trained to choose the quick hit every single time. Here's the trap of financial negligence. You're earning money, maybe for the first time in your life, and your only financial strategy is spend what I want, save what's left over, which means you save nothing because there's always something else to buy. You're not thinking about compound interest, retirement accounts, investment strategies. Those feel like old people problems. You'll deal with them later. Right now, you just want to enjoy your money. But your 20s are the most valuable financial decade of your life because of compound interest. The money you invest at 23 will grow exponentially more than money invested at 33, 43, or 53. Every year you delay is costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars in long-term wealth, but it doesn't feel urgent because the consequences are distant, invisible, and easily ignored. So you stay ignorant about money, you make impulsive purchases, you carry credit card debt, and you tell yourself you'll get serious about finances once you're making more money. The trap is that later never comes. If you can't manage money responsibly when you're making $40,000 a year, you won't suddenly develop that discipline when you're making $80,000. You'll just have more expensive habits. The people who build wealth in their 30s and 40s aren't the ones who earned the most. They're the ones who started building good financial systems in their 20s, even when they were broke. Let's talk about the trap of shallow learning. You consume enormous amounts of information, podcasts, articles, videos, courses. You feel like you're learning and growing, but here's what's actually happening. You're collecting information without integrating it. You're not practicing, you're not applying, you're not going deep. You're just skimming the surface of 1,000 topics, which creates an illusion of knowledge without the actual competence. Real learning is uncomfortable. It requires repetition, failure, struggle, and time. It requires doing the thing badly for a while before you get good. But that process is slow and frustrating, so instead you jump to the next interesting topic, the next course, the next insight. You're addicted to the feeling of learning without doing the work of mastery. This trap leaves you perpetually at the beginner level in everything. You know a lot of facts, but you can't actually do anything valuable. And when it comes time to build a career or create something meaningful, you have nothing to offer because you never went deep enough to develop real skill. The trap is that consuming information feels productive. It feels like you're investing in yourself. But unless that information changes your behavior, unless you practice, apply, and integrate it, you're just entertaining yourself with educational content. You're no different than someone watching reality TV, except you've convinced yourself you're being productive. Now for the trap of relationship neglect. You're focused on your career, your goals, your personal growth. Relationships feel secondary, something you'll invest in once you've figured yourself out. So you let friendships fade, you don't put effort into your romantic relationship, you don't call your family, you're too busy building your future to maintain the relationships that make life meaningful. But here's what you don't realize. Relationships are the foundation, not the decoration. They're not what you add once everything else is in place. They're what everything else is built on. The quality of your life will be determined more by your relationships than by any achievement, possession, or status marker. When you're 40, you won't reminisce about the extra hour you spent at work. You'll remember the experiences you shared with people you loved. But by then, if you've neglected those relationships for 2 decades, they'll be gone. The friends will have drifted away, the romantic partner will have left, the family relationships will be distant and strained. You can't rebuild decades of connection once you finally realize it mattered. The trap is that relationship neglect doesn't show up as a problem immediately. Friends don't cut you off after one declined invitation. Partners don't leave after one forgotten conversation. Family doesn't disown you for missing one call. The damage accumulates slowly, invisibly, until one day you look around and realize you're successful but alone, and you can't figure out when it happened because it was too gradual to notice. Here's the final trap, and it might be the most important, the trap of unawareness itself. You don't think these traps apply to you. You read something like this and think, yeah, other people definitely struggle with that, but I'm doing fine. You have no real metric for evaluating your own life because you've never stepped back far enough to see the full picture. You're inside the maze, walking in circles, convincing yourself you're making progress because you're moving. The human mind is designed to rationalize, to create stories that make our current behavior feel reasonable. So even as you're drifting, you'll tell yourself a story about how this is all part of the journey. Even as you're wasting time, you'll convince yourself you're taking a necessary break. Even as you're avoiding challenges, you'll tell yourself you're being strategic. Your mind is lying to you, and the lie is so comfortable, so well constructed that you don't even question it. The trap of unawareness means you'll spend your entire 20s confident that you're on track, only to arrive at 30 and realize you were standing still the whole time. The people who succeed aren't necessarily smarter or more talented. They're the ones who develop the ability to see themselves clearly, to recognize when they're trapped, and to take action even when it's uncomfortable. So here's what you need to understand. Your 20s are not a throwaway decade. They're not a time to coast while you figure things out. Every day that passes is building something, either the life you want or a life you'll desperately want to escape. The silent traps are ruining your future right now, in this moment, through small choices and patterns you barely notice. The question is whether you'll wake up before it's too late, or whether you'll be the person who looks back at 30 with regret, wondering where the time went and why you didn't do anything about it when you still could.